So welcome back, guys. I have got two projects coming up that I'm going to need some really nice finished lumber for. So let's see if we can get some rough cut lumber and turn it into some nice stuff. First, I need the grapple on the tractor, which means I need the bucket unloaded so I can get it off. This box is going to be the subject of a video coming up very soon. It's got something to do with, well, I'll just let y'all wait and be in suspense. It's really cool. Oh, it's also really heavy. Let some pressure out. Much better. A stack of lumber with 10 on the top is about the best spot for wasps that I have ever seen, so we need to definitely check before we go any farther. I think we're okay. These boards have been sitting here stacked like this since February of last year, so about a year and 8 months, so a gracious plenty of time to be dried out. So let's check and see what their moisture content is. 13.2, that's really kind of high when you get right down to it. If they were put in the kiln, they would have been down to like 5%, probably something like that. 13% is mid-range, I guess you could say, on the moisture. We're going to use them anyways. They were here. I'm glad they're gone. So for this first step of making finished boards out of rough cut lumber, I'm going to need some boards that are already in fair shape. So I'm going to kind of pull off lower boards so I can get some good straight edges. For the first step, these two boards are all that I'm going to need, so let's get started with them. So for this first step, the sawmill has got to be really level, a lot more level than if I was just cutting some boards or cutting some logs into just rough cut boards. We've got to make sure it's really level. I guess it would have been better to say that I actually need the sawmill to be flat. I mean, it does need to be as level as possible from front to back and left to right, but it really just needs to be incredibly flat. And one of the ways that I do that is that I just kind of eyeball it. I'll take my eye and I'll put it down this rail right here, and I'm sure that you really can't pick this up at all on the camera, but I'll look down this rail and inevitably there's going to be a little bow in it. It's going to be kind of sagging in the middle. So what I'll do is I'll just raise up the middle two jacks to try to level it out. It's really not bad this time, so I'm not going to go too far with this. Now at this point, if you wanted to, I'm sure that you could take a string and run it down either on the top of this rail or on the top of these bunks, it's deer season, bunks from the front of the trailer to the back of the trailer, or the sawmill rather, and get it really level like that or really flat like that, but I've got a different way to do it. So for finished lumber, the most important thing that you need is straight edges. If you don't have two dead straight edges, you really can't do a lot with it. It's not going to fit together like I'm going to want it to fit together. These boards are destined to be on the walls of our living room. We're going to be remodeling our living room, hopefully in the relatively near future. And I'm not going to do anything fancy with these. They're not going to be tongued and grooved or anything like that. They're just going to be butted up next to each other. That's what we've been doing in the rest of the house with our remodel, and it's worked out really, really well so far. So first of all, we've got to get some really straight edges on these boards. And I know a lot of y'all are thinking, well, didn't you get straight edges when you milled it in the first place? And yeah, the answer is yes, but boards move when they dry and they just don't stay where you had them in the first place. On top of that, the blade might have been a little off. You get some wobbles in there, kind of like that, some wavy cuts, and this one is actually pretty flat, pretty straight on that edge. But boards just don't stay straight when they dry out, and that's why you got to come along behind and fix that problem. There's a pretty bad dip right there. Can y'all see through that? That's the kind of stuff that we got to fix. And at this point, we're still in the setup stage. The mill is not 100% set up yet. I'm going to use the very first cut on these two boards to try to see what I need to do with the mill. Again, I'm still trying to set the mill up to make sure it's perfectly flat on the top. So what I can do is I can take those two cut edges, this cut edge and this cut edge, and I can butt them up against each other. And if they're flat up against each other, that means the mill is good. But if there's any kind of a bow in there, I know I've still got some work to do on the mill. Now, I don't know how good the camera is going to pick this up, but there is a little bit of a bow in the middle right here. There's some light coming through that end down there and this end over here. They're touching one another, but there's a little gap in the middle. And again, I don't think that's coming over really good on camera. So anyway, what we need to do to fix that is bring these jack stands up just a little bit so that that bow will get out of there. Now, the gap that's between those two boards is not much of a gap. It's probably not any more than 1/8 of an inch, maybe just a little bit less. So I don't need to come up too much on my jacks here. Basically what that means is that the mill is still bowed down just a little bit, and that's a function of these two middle jacks. So I'll just bring them up just a hair and we'll make another cut. That's not quite what I was wanting either, so I'm going to adjust it again and give it another cut and see what happens. That took a couple of tries, but I got it to where I can work with it. There's still a tiny gap in it, maybe a 1/16 of an inch or so right there, but for the most part it is really, really flat, really, really straight, totally acceptable for what we're going to be doing with it. So now I'll flip these two boards over and go ahead and get the other side as well. Something that I forgot to mention here is you need to make sure you have a really good blade on the mill. It's probably best to put a new one on. I did not, because the one that's on there is still sharp. But if you don't put a new blade, or if you don't have a good blade on there, you may get wavy cuts, you may get rough cuts. These aren't the smoothest cuts, but they're pretty well acceptable for two boards that are going to be kind of butted up against each other. So make sure you've got a really good blade on the mill, or you're not going to get the edges that you want. I always think it's easier to do a whole bunch at a time, but it always ends up making me work harder. There we go. Before I plane these, I want to go ahead and check the flatness of the mill again to make sure my edges are going to match up. I wouldn't say that it's perfect, but I think it's going to work for what I'm trying to do. Let's put it on the planer. So there's still a very small gap right in here. But let's put it on the planer and see what it looks like after that. I think y'all pretty well get the point. Plane the boards and they start looking a lot nicer, right? Let's put a few together and see what they'll look like butted up against each other on a wall. Well, these look really, really good. I ended up flipping this middle one over because the bow made it look pretty bad. And when it's on the wall, it's going to be on the studs, nailed to the studs, so that bow's not going to be an issue. But these turned out really good. There's a very small gap in these, but it is really not enough to write home about. If you can see it, let me see if y'all can see it right in here. Maybe you can see it right there a little bit, but it's not. Let me bring these together. There we go. Yeah, it's not enough to write home about. I'm not going to lose a whole lot of sleep over that right there. So that's what the finished wall will eventually look like. I mean, it's a country house, and this is more than acceptable for where it's going. So I put an unfinished board up next to these just to give you an idea of kind of a before and after. You can see there's a color difference. These are much dingier. These are much lighter. They've got that surface junk off of them from just sitting there. This one right here has got frayed edges right here from the sawmill, and these have got nice straight edges, flat edges, clean edges. So pretty big difference when you get right down to it. This one is ready to go on the wall, and this one is going to take a little bit more processing. So I think that gives you an idea of what it takes to take a rough cut board and turn it into something that's usable. I do want to do one more thing before I end this video. I've got some nice cedar that I'd like to process because I've got a project coming up with it too. These are some cedar boards that I milled a really long time ago, probably 4 or so years, 3 or 4 years, and it was actually so long ago it was on my old sawmill, the LT10, and I finally got a use for them. So let's plane these down and see what we can get them looking like. This is 3 of the 6 boards that I just planed, and it was actually 3 boards that I cut in half. They were about 18 feet long. It was a very long log, and they turned out really nice. This one, of course, has got a pretty bad split in it, but there's still enough there that I can get some use out of it. So I'm not going to edge these with the mill. The edges are already pretty straight, and I'm going to be only using some short sections of this to possibly make some keepsake boxes, and I'll be able to, if necessary, get a straight edge off of the sawmill. End up having to clean that up regardless, but the edges are already pretty well straight. So anyway, this is looking really good. I planed these to about 5/8, maybe a little bit more than 5/8, but these turned out super nice. And I do wish that I could share this smell with y'all. Of course, most of y'all already know this stuff smells absolutely wonderful. Pine is up under there somewhere. There's the pine there. It doesn't smell half bad either. Well guys, that's going to do it for this video. I think that kind of gives you an idea of how I take rough cut boards and put them on the sawmill and get good straight edges and run them through the planer. It's a pretty simple process, not particularly time consuming. The sawmill makes it really nice, and then I can edge quite a few boards at one time. So if you've got a sawmill, I know that most of y'all don't have a sawmill, but a lot of y'all do. If you have a sawmill, you've got an edger. Just make sure you've got a really good sharp blade on it, and make sure your mill is super flat, and you can get boards that are suitable for probably 99% of the purposes that you're going to use them for. So I hope that was informative, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you on the next one.